so I just really said, you come up with a psychedelic video about a cartoon dog and we are on our way. I said, you can do anything you want with it, but just give me a psychedelic video about a cartoon dog, because, we're in the world of, Snoopy and Deputy Dog and Mother's Little Helper and just every great cartoon dog you can think of. Sherman.
Oh, yeah.
Big fan of Mr. Peabody, Sherman and Mr. Peabody. And I would just I will be happy. If nothing else happens with this album, I will just be happy if the Existential Terrier makes it into the Hall of Fame of cartoon dogs.
Oh, my nose always goes to the same melody. Day by day fades away. Tell me why.
Listen to the Vibes.
Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Listen to the Vibes, and I'm very privileged to have Max Vanderwolf here with me. We're going to talk about his album, get to know him, have a great conversation. Let's kick this off. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Oh, let's see. New York, born and raised, kicked around town, doing the typical things kids do, getting into trouble, listening to music, going to school, getting high, seeing gigs, and then stumbling into in and out of universities, and ended up in New York City making art and curating art shows, and eventually was asked to curate the gigs at the world famous Knitting Factory, the sort of home of experimental downtown art music. And it was pretty wild. Did that for a few years, and then, worked with a lot of great, interesting artists in that space. People like, Philip Glass and David Byrne and John Zorn and people like that, and a lot of lesser known and just as brilliant musicians as well. It was a really great place and a really great time in New York City's creative history. And then I was asked to go to London to program at the Royal Festival Hall, which is, a big step up in terms of capacities, room capacities, 3 different halls, a whole site, a whole gigantic canvas on which to place some of your favorite artists. And I got to work with lots of favorites, doing lots of creative projects, and also was able to work with a lot of artists that weren't that well known, or perhaps were even overlooked and forgotten, So, artists like, I had the White Stripes over pretty early. I had Joanna Newsom. I actually had the White Stripes performing with Jeff Beck. It was the only way I could get him to do the music of the Yardbirds on a 3-night Jeff Beck retrospective. So when I was talking with Jeff and his manager about doing a retrospective, the only way, I knew it was a sensitive issue to ask Jeff to perform the music of the Yardbirds.
Yeah.
I was already told by the manager that's not going to go over very well, but it's a retrospective, Jeff. We can't ignore the fact that you were in one of the most important bands of all time. He was pretty forthright and quick to say, I can't play the music of the Yardbirds with those guys. And, we forget that some of us forget, there's a lot of music that can only be played under the youthful hallucinogenic of youth. And it is, and the Yardbirds are one of those bands, they are kids. They're sharp kids, but they are kids, the Yardbirds. And, some music, I mean, you could say the same thing about early Stones and the Who, but those bands grew out gradually from their youthfulness.
Mm-hmm.
I question the Who playing my generation. I love it. I mean, they play it so well, but there is something about it. And, Jeff was like, I don't think I can do it. It's not going to sound like the Yardbirds. And at the time, there was this hot new band called the White Stripes. And I said, okay, what if I got some young kids at the White Stripes to be your backing band? And he immediately said, then I'll do it. Literally, they got on stage, and I'd say they played through everything maybe twice. And Jack and Jeff just looked at each other and they said, let's leave it. Because it was so live. It was so exciting. And they didn't want to over-rehearse it, that it became dead.
Yeah.
They knew that they would pull it off. And that was it. They went up that night. It was, it was part of a bigger show, but it was definitely about a half hour of the most exciting music I'd ever heard in my life. That was just one of many really cool events I put on. So, I was doing my own band at the time, but I was working hard as well. And I was working on something that was, pretty exciting and enjoyable. And there was always the next one. Who was I going to get to work with next? There were always proposals going out. So, the music thing was, well, it was really important to me. And I never really stopped writing music, and I never stopped getting the band together to either rehearse or sometimes record. The promotion of music, that whole side of it, which includes playing live, designing posters and flyers, getting the music out to promoters and bookers and agents and managers, setting up things, finding someone to do your PR, like all that. It's like a full-time job in itself. And I'm doing a lot of that now, so I know that. But there was no way I could do 2 jobs at the time. Also, the lifestyle in London when you're a promoter and things are going good, and I guess people like you and are interested in you and want to come see the shows you put on. So you're always trading favors. Like, I had access to just about any gig I wanted to see. It's really different over there, and it was really a great place to be a promoter. And I was rightfully swept up in it, but it did come as an expense to my life as a musician.
I can say that I can hear a lot of influences in your music, but without sounding like those influences.
Yeah.
And it was refreshing. I mean, it's like going back to the 70s and hearing a new band come out to me.
Yeah, I've been hearing that. A couple of reviews came out this week. There was one review that I really liked. I was kind of surprised to see it because I'm a big fan of the early Jack Bruce album, Songs for the Tailor and Harmony Row. And, they're not hugely popular records, but Songs for the Tailor in particular is like, to me, it's one of the greatest albums of all time. And there was a review today that just referred to me as a glam rock Jack Bruce. And yeah, I mean, it's like, Jack Bruce is, his influence on me as a vocalist is really profound. I've really I will be sometimes singing something and I'll be kind of like, that's probably a little bit like Jack Bruce, isn't it? And if you're singing something, particularly something bluesy, Jack's going to show you the way. Janice is going to show you the way. Jimmy's going to show you the way. There are Robert Plant's going to show you the way. You're playing something and you're you just start singing, you know, you're reacting to the music, and you've got all these layers and layers of listening, you know, as recent as, you know, things from the 2000s, but going all the way back to the, I was going to say the 1960s, but some of my listening goes back beyond that, and that stuff's going to creep in. And I know musicians who resist it and fight it or disguise it. And I'm just aware of it. I don't ever want to get into a situation where I'm impersonating anything, but you know, my influences are diverse enough that I'm pretty comfortable that if I, you know, maybe I don't know, maybe I sound a little like Cat Stevens here, but maybe somewhere over there I sound like, I don't know, Jack White or.
You know, there was one point I can say it almost sounded like Mickey Thomas singing. You hit some
Mickey Thomas?
Man,
Wow.
You hit some notes, and I was like, dang, because he's one of my favorite singers.
Well, I can get up there. That's one thing I am self-conscious about these days is not relying on my upper register, because I can get up there. And back in my hard rock and heavy metal days, I was really pushing it. I was really pushing into my upper register. And nothing against that, but I personally find it hard to listen back to some of that stuff I was doing. I was really pushing into the Freddie Mercury zone with some of my past vocals. And not just Freddie Mercury, you know, Perry Farrell from James Addiction was a big vocal influence on me. And, you know, I was just singing and trying to sing in that range. That was also you know, you're playing with a loud band, you're always going to cut through when you're in that vocal register. And I was playing with a very loud band at the time.
I could have sworn it sounded almost like Jeff Lynne at some time.
Yeah, I wouldn't really call Jeff Lynne an influence, but I think Jeff Lynne and I share a lot of influences, which are the Beatles.
Oh, yeah.
But, you know, I have a latent appreciation for ELO, but really at the time I was not a kid who collected those records. You know, it's not to my advantage that I tend to write very broadly. Mm-hmm. There are a lot of musicians who are much more clever than I that keep their writing, at least album to album, hemmed in. And they say, okay, I'm going to write a bunch of sort of acoustic-y songs in this vein, or I'm going to introduce electronic instruments on this group of songs to keep it sounding together. You know, I'm a big fan of the White Album by the Beatles. I'm a big fan of a band like Ween, who, you know, song to song, every track is kind of different. I mean, I can't speak for all their albums, but the albums by them that I really appreciate are different track to track. Songs in the Key of Life by Stevie Wonder, it's different track to track. The Velvet Underground, the Banana Album, every track is different. And, you know, it's a journey. It all hangs together. I think it hangs together. I think what you have on this record, 12 Little Killers, is a side A, which is a little bit more blues based, and a side B, which is quite psychedelic and quite ethereal in some ways. And you know, what drives it together, I guess, is the themes, the musical themes, what's contained in the lyrics. The vocalist is the same. I don't think my vocal sound changes all that much. A little bit it does. You know, you sing blues, it's going to be a little bit different than when you sing something that's sort of pastoral or psychedelic or something. But yeah, I mean, my obsession with that kind of variety of music goes very deep. I'm a kid who like made mixtapes for all my friends in the, in the 70s and the 80s. My style of curating festivals and gigs is influenced by the Fillmore East and the Fillmore West, where you'd have, Sly Stone, Miles Davis, and Laura Nyro on the same bill, or the Grateful Dead with James Cotton and and Taj Mahal on the same bill, or you'd have The Who with Elmore James and Joan Baez. You know what I mean? It's just like, there's, I guess I recognize the strength there is, the purity. I'll bring it to the extreme. There's a real powerful strength that the Ramones have, because every song sounds just about the same. There's a real purity to Chuck Berry. Even though there is a lot of variety in Chuck Berry, and there's always the richness of the lyrics that stand out in their own way. But, I do get it. I mean, there are people who write in a specific idiom, and God bless them, it can be great. And you don't really mind that all the songs sit in a very close range. There are a lot of bands right now. I mean, I think most bands right now kind of do that, I like a band called Beach House very much. Songs kind of sound all the same. Spiritualize. You speak to Jay Spaceman, he'll tell you, I only really know 3 chords. And he's built a whole career around these 3 chords. But
there's a lot of bands that did that.
A lot of bands do that, and it's what they do, and it's, more power to them. I'm always like pushing out. I'm always like, well, what is this chord? What can I do with this? Well, what happens if I combine this chord with this chord? Or what happens if I start using this sound in this way? And I just, sometimes that leads to another song, and I grow in that direction, or sometimes it's just that song that makes that statement, and it's the right statement to make in that case. That's probably going to work against me.
Well, let's see, I believe the song is Glisten, and it's almost as if David Bowie and Pink Floyd got together to do a song.
Yeah. Yeah, there's some David Bowie and Pink Floyd. I think there's a little bit of Yes and Genesis in that one, I would say.
I could hear that.
Weird, something in the vocal is vaguely Elton John about it, early Elton John. Yeah, there's a lot in there. I don't think you can quite pinpoint it. It's also interesting, there were no drums on that track, which kind of made it sort of an interesting approach. But it's, it's really layered with a lot of lap steel guitar, which I play, and a lot of synth that's played by my keyboard player, and some strumming guitars. And it's just, kind of works. It was written on an acoustic guitar, and it was written sort of around an obsession between 2 chords that sounded quite strange together, but suggested a lot of melodic possibilities. I'm hoping 2 things, I'm hoping people listen to it in its totality, because it is a journey. It is a sequential. I spend a lot of time. I'm a big fan of the album, and all this shuffle mode bullshit that we get in the age of Spotify is not really good for artists making a prolonged statement. And so I'm hoping people take the time and at least do side A, do side B, even if you don't do them together, because each one of them is a composite. And I think, I hope the songs work individually, but I hope people try to take them on as a composite. And then, you know, I hope people listen beyond the influences. This is an album that you could put on in your car when you're taking that, you know, that 45-minute to hour-long drive where you just want to, you know, it's like, I was going to say, it's like a podcast, you know? but in a way it is, you know, that's how we listen. That's what long form listening has become in our age. People tend to not listen to anything long form when they're listening to music these days. They tend to listen to a piece here and a piece there. I'm guilty of it myself, man. You know, I do keep up with a lot of contemporary music. I do like to find out I'm always looking for what the best shit is out there. And I can tell you some good stuff that I think you'd like, actually. And, but like for when people do actually listen right now, they tend to be listening to podcasts. So, you know, kind of thinking maybe I should just re-release this album and call it a podcast. See how many podcast listeners we get.
Might be surprised.
I think we might be surprised, actually. I think it's a pretty hot idea. One of the reasons the gestation on this album was so prolonged was because I really struggled to find a logical sequence for about 45 songs that we had. I'd say we recorded 30 songs, and then there were another, you know, 10 songs that were in a state of early stages. And I really, really could not come up with the album. I couldn't come up with that 10 or 12 or 15 songs. It's one of the things you have when you write very broadly. You then have to compile it into a statement that makes sense in a sequence that has an arc. And I got stuck. And time after time, I just kind of, one or two things. I either said, well, let's just go into the studio and record more songs. And, or sometimes I just like, I don't want to look at it. I don't want to think about it. It's just not adding up to me. And I finally, I mean, you know, the great musicians that were around me who really donated their time and talent, and sometimes for years, they all got, you know, I knew they were getting really frustrated with my lack of conclusion on this project. And I finally, you know, turned to my keyboard player, my dear friend Sam, who you'll hear all over that record. And he's the only keyboard player on that record. And said, you do it. You show me how this makes sense. And he said, I'll do it, but you don't get to tell me, you know, once I do it, it's done. Mm-hmm. And I negotiated for one veto. I said, okay, but I get one song that I can say no to and swap in another song. And he reluctantly agreed to that. And he presented the album to me, the sequence to me. And I was really surprised. Like I instantly recognized that he had sorted it out. And one thing that really surprised me but delighted me was he chose I Am Not a Mountain as the first song. I'd never thought of it as an opening track before. Mm-hmm. But what I really like what the song does is it's kind of surprising, especially in my background and the music I make, to open a record with such a whisper of a song. Yeah. And it's a kind of confessional. It reminds me a little bit of Pigs on the Wing, Part 1 from the Pink Floyd Animals mm-hmm. record. It's just kind of, it's very personal. It opens the record on the most personal note I think there is on the whole record. There are a couple of, I mean, there's a lot of personal notes, but that's a really intimate moment. And he opened the album with a very intimate statement, and I recognized that, and that was great. And then we head into some rockers after that.
Oh yeah.
And my one veto, by the way, was he put in a song that I just really didn't get with. It's a great song, but I haven't figured out if it's my song yet, if you know what I mean. Feels like it's a song I could give to another singer. It may end up on a record someday. I'm getting perhaps more comfortable with it, but I put in Glisten instead. So Glisten was my, we have to have Glisten on the record. So I moved that one out, put Glisten in.
Yeah, Glisten's one of my favorites on there. And the existential Terrier.
Yeah. Have you
cool.
seen the videos yet?
Yes, I have. I was going to ask you who made those videos.
So there's a guy named Alden Volney in France, and I can't remember how I first came across his videos, but I knew I wanted video animation. I also really wanted to hook up with somebody that was gonna like really carry the visual vision forward for my music, because as you say, it's pretty broad. It's pretty wide. I'm really going for a lot of different areas in music. I wanted a visual identity that kind of tied it in nicely. And so, we've done 4 videos now. We did the one that features Robert Wyatt on the EP called I can't believe I drew a blank on it. And then once you draw a blank, then you like freak out and you draw a blank again.
I do it all the time, man.
Yeah. When the Fire Grows Cold is this track that features Robert Wyatt. That's that's just such a stunning, beautiful video. And then, but the first one he did for me was Glisten. And then he did one that I'm going to release in, I think, October, November, which is a really different kind of track. It's kind of futuristic. And he did a super cool video for it. And it's a very different kind of song. It's a song we played as a rock band, but then I felt that it needed a kind of refreshing, which we did a sort of retro futurism on that one. So we'll have that one out in November. And then the last one he did is Existential Terrier, which basically I just went to him and I said, look, I know it's maybe a little corny or a little funny, or this is different from all your kind of psychedelic stuff, but let's just have a cartoon dog. Because in the history of cartoon dogs,
with his own cereal.
Yeah, exactly. So I just really said, you come up with a psychedelic video about a cartoon dog and we are on our way. I said, you can do anything you want with it, but just give me a psychedelic video about a cartoon dog, because, we're in the world of, Snoopy and Deputy Dog and Mother's Little Helper and just every great cartoon dog you can think of. Sherman.
Oh, yeah.
Big fan of Mr. Peabody, Sherman and Mr. Peabody. And I would just I will be happy. If nothing else happens with this album, I will just be happy if the Existential Terrier makes it into the Hall of Fame of cartoon dogs.
It's been an honor to have you on the show. I appreciate your time, man.
Well, I really appreciate the depth at which you've approached this interview and the depth at which you've done some listening. And I just, I really hope this is one of these albums you keep coming back to, because that to me is, when I hear, it's great when people love your album, but like when you meet people who you've known for a long time and they keep coming back to the album, say, oh man, I listened to it, or you get an email from someone you haven't heard for a while and said, I'm still listening to this album, and you're just like, thank God, man, I'm actually in the collection. I'm actually in your album collection somewhere between the Allman Brothers and Frank Zappa, I'm in there and you're still listening to me. That's really good. That's one of the best things about this.
Well, when your new stuff comes out, please let me know, because I'd love to have you back on to talk about it, and I definitely want to promote it.
Cool.
Thank you for your time. I want to thank everyone out there. If you are new to the channel, I appreciate you stopping by. Hit that subscribe button. If you are regular to the channel, I thank you for your support. It's because of you that we do what we do. So until the next one, everyone, please take care. Be kind to one another. God bless, and peace.